artificial general intelligence, robots thinking for themselves, solving real world problems, not needing human input, and maybe getting to somewhere like a Skynet scenario, or a Skynet scenario without all the fear. I can't believe I brought up Skynet.
I'm glad that you were the one to bring up Skynet and not me. I was about to wade into that, but
there is actually a Chinese startup that has called itself Skynet. So I definitely wouldn't.
That is foreboding. That is somewhat foreboding.
Let me geek out for a second. The model doesn't even read the words. What it reads is number representations of the words. So it's that abstracted away from reality. I can't remember the exact joke, but it's something like, if you want finance AI, go to America. If you want social AI, go to China. If you want if you want AI regulation, go to Europe, because that's all we're producing right now.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first video I think we've done like this on our YouTube channel. You might recognize Tom from a number of our data analytics videos.
Hi.
The living legend himself. I'm Calum, I'm the video team lead here at CareerFoundry, and today we just wanted to get together, have a bit of a chat, talk about AI.
Yeah.
It's a hot topic everywhere, it's trending.
It is.
Tom, do you maybe want to introduce yourself first?
Hi everyone, Tom, I've been working at CareerFoundry for a couple of years now. I'm the senior data scientist, and I'm working with an amazing bunch of data analysts, data engineers, and data scientists building AI products for CareerFoundry, and also researching the field in general. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I thought we could just have a bit of a free-form discussion session. I could maybe ask you some questions about AI, where you see it going, what you're interested in, what excites you about this technology. Maybe first off the bat, like AI, it kind of came out of nowhere. Well, I mean, it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
In one form or another.
It's both of those things at the same time. It's been around since the 50s. You guys should check out the Dartmouth conference. It was a conference organized by a bunch of AI geeks in the 50s, and they were basically thinking that they could solve AI in a couple of years. Okay. And then it's been through all of these hype cycles, and they call them AI winters and AI summers, when interest is either high or not high at all. And I've been involved in the field for I guess the last 6 or 7 years, but it's had peaks, probably most famously in the beginning of the 2000s, also at the beginning of 2010s, and then obviously recently with the release of ChatGPT at end of 2022.
You mentioned ChatGPT, and also I'd never heard of this phrase, AI summers and AI winters. That's really interesting, but it's a good phrase. But yeah, ChatGPT, it feels like no one was talking about this 6 months ago, and now it's exploded, and you can't seem to go on the internet without seeing some kind of AI content, or how to level up your skill set, or produce 600 articles in a minute, et cetera, et cetera. What is ChatGPT? Maybe you could explain it in kind of layman's terms for the general viewer.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Depends how deep you want to go into the topic, but basically it's another AI algorithm. It's called a large language model, or LLM, and it's basically just a neural network, a very complex neural network with an architecture called the transformer architecture. So the T in GPT is a transformer. And that was a paper released by Google at the end of 2017, 2018, let's say, called Attention is All You Need. That basically released this new architecture type, the transformer. And GPT is like the latest and best version of that. It's huge. It's somewhere around 500 billion parameters, whereas a model that we might build and deploy in CareerFoundry might have a few thousand or tens of thousands of parameters. So it's incredibly large. It's been trained on basically the entire internet. And all it's been trained to do, well, it's quite a complex system, but at its essence, you give it the entire internet and you ask it to predict the next word or missing words from a sentence, and it just learns patterns in human language. And through those patterns, it's able to mimic so effectively that it essentially is able to recreate factual information like, how do I become a UX designer, or write me an article in the style of Shakespeare or something like that. So it's powerful, it's new, it's about as big as it can get, and as you know, it's pretty cool.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, and also in terms of like a company like CareerFoundry, where we both work, using or leveraging AI, like what would that look like for an average business? Like how, when you say CareerFoundry uses AI, what does that look like? Why would a business use it?
Great question. I mean, CareerFoundry's, I'm lucky to be a CareerFoundry. I'm lucky to be working with a bunch of data experts. So we actually build models from scratch using, low-level Python code, but you don't need to be a programmer to use AI. There's a bunch of tools out there already where you can have a very little level of programming or AI expertise and still leverage all the functionality. So it kind of depends what level you're at. Like low level, hire a bunch of data experts, build some machine learning models to solve problems that your business has. But higher level, just Google what's out there on the internet, try out some free tools. I guess you've probably been trying out some cool tools.
All the tools. There's so many tools. It's really fun to experiment with them. Yeah. But just to touch on something you mentioned there, we were talking before, this is kind of cheating for the audience, but we were talking before about the difference between machine learning and actual AI. Could you maybe expand on the differences between that? Because I find it quite interesting that you mentioned AI or ChatGPT, large language models, are more like kind of patterns, building patterns and predicting the next word, etc. But how does that differ from something like machine learning? And how are they related?
That's a great question. It's a complex complex question to answer succinctly. But basically, you can think of AI as the superset of all techniques related to helping computers do stuff for you. And then inside that, a subset of AI is machine learning. And really, when I consider myself a data scientist or I work in AI, I always think about machine learning. That's the kind of problems that I face on a daily basis. And then inside machine learning, you have a subset which is deep learning, which is like neural networks and stuff like that. So the difference between AI and ML is gray, and you'll get a different answer depending on who you ask. But basically, I think if you're at the sort of business end of the problem, you're probably thinking about machine learning. And if you're thinking more generally about the sector, the impact on the human economy, the impact on psychology, then you might think about AI more generally.
Interesting.
Yeah. I also love thinking about how science fiction helps us think about framing the future of the interaction between robots and humans or tech and humans. And in that space, I'd definitely be thinking about AI when it comes to famous science fiction authors as
That's really interesting. I mean, we just for context for the audience, we were also filming a video in this office space just before this conversation, and there was an element of it. You were using an AI tool to analyze a PDF, but it wasn't quite going to plan, and there were some frustrations there. Can you maybe talk about that and maybe some of the limitations that are?
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, we have a great video editing team, so we always put together really highly polished content. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, everyone else. But you don't get to see all the mistakes that get made or the issues that we have during filming.
They are very few and far between, of course.
Of course. Yeah. But it's true to say that particularly a tool like GPT is inherently random. There are papers out there where it's been called a stochastic parrot. So, it's an algorithm that just repeats what it's seen. So stochastic just means random, and it's a parrot, like it's parroting back what it's seen, but it has no deep understanding of the actual problems that it's being asked to solve. And so, practically speaking, when I use ChatGPT, I find you never get two answers that are the same. That's the randomness. It's always producing slightly different outputs. And B, this parrot thing means that you often get hallucinations. You get the algorithm making stuff up. And it might lead you down routes that it doesn't actually sort of trust itself. So we were making a video trying to use a tool code interpreter to pass a PDF. And the first time we tried it said, oh yeah, I can do that for you, but then it hit a technical error. The second time we asked it with a new chat window, it said, I'm unable to provide PDF reading as a functionality, even though we've just asked it. It's just successfully done.
It's its sole purpose, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of its main goals. So even itself doesn't really understand what it can do and can't do, and that's that inherent randomness in there. So it's it's obviously incredibly powerful, but it comes with risks, which is why you should always read and check the output that you're getting from it.
Massive segue, but this is a great cup of tea.
Thank you.
What is your favorite brand of tea bag?
It's got to be Yorkshire tea. For a couple of reasons. My family's from Yorkshire, and B, for me, it just tastes the best. Okay. How about you?
I'm a Twinings man.
Okay, nice.
For gentlemen who know.
We can get a sponsorship deal from them for that.
Call me. Yeah. Cool. I mean, what would you say is the most exciting for you? You work in data science, data analytics. Obviously, AI is a big passion of yours as well, both professionally and personally. What is for you the most exciting thing about this technology?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, and I'd love to get your input on it as well afterwards. But from my side, there's a few different ways to answer the question. I really enjoy Firstly, let's just say it's a really exciting time to be in AI. There's so much hype in the sector right now. Lots of investment, lots of interest, lots of research. So it's just fun. It's a fun time to be in AI. Personally, I've always been interested in natural language processing, or NLP, which is like a subset of machine learning, which just looks at how can you teach computers to understand and process human language. And so in the realm of NLP, large language models are indeed an NLP product. But in the realm of NLP, I'm also thinking about things like how can we represent reality in a way that allows models to be slightly less prone to these sorts of hallucinations than we currently see in LLMs. I mean, I'm definitely not the only one interested in this problem, and I'm certainly not the first one to think about it. So famous people who are kind of skeptical on the power of current LLM architectures are people like Yann LeCun, who's the chief AI scientist at Meta, Facebook, one of the inventors of convolutional neural networks. So this guy's a pioneer in the field. And, other people with perhaps slightly less AI prowess, like Noam Chomsky and a bunch of other intellectuals, really are worried about what they see as maybe a core design flaw in the architecture of the transformer, which is it's so prone to hallucinate because it doesn't have any deep representation of the reality underneath the text that it's been trained on. So I'm really thinking about how can we design data structures, data systems that model reality more effectively than just simply taking all the internet and trying to sort of break it down into tokens and then getting the model to predict tokens. I mean, let me geek out for a second. The model doesn't even read the words. What it reads is number representations of the words. So it's that abstracted away from reality.
Almost like the binary code behind like the text. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, something like a binary represent, like a long list of numbers that represent the word, but it doesn't have a deep connection to the reality. So there's a bunch of research being done in tree structures or knowledge graphs, and a bunch of other geeky ways of representing human language and knowledge in a way that we can sort of leverage models to do a better job of not hallucinating and maybe helping us avoid the pitfalls that we saw in our filming content earlier. So,
one of the few pitfalls.
One of the
virtually none. Yeah. You mentioned the transformer element being the kind of limiting factor. What is that in relation to like large language models?
I mean, let me start out by saying I'm not a hater on the transformer. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, just to give you some context, so before the transformer, we had the sort of state-of-the-art models were these things called recurrent neural networks, RNNs, and a version of those called LSTMs were particularly popular up until sort of the mid 2010s, and they were significantly worse at capturing context and capturing like deep semantic and syntactic meaning in the language. So transformers really have taken the game up to a whole other level. And in that sense, I'm a big fan of them, but they are, I think, I would argue, and many people would argue, they're not the final model architecture that we're going to see before we get to the kind of crazy notions of, artificial general intelligence, robots thinking for themselves, solving real-world problems, not needing human input, and maybe getting to somewhere like a Skynet scenario, or Skynet scenario without all the fear. I can't believe I brought up Skynet.
I'm glad that you were the one to bring up Skynet and not me. I was about to wade into that, but
there is actually a Chinese startup that has called itself Skynet. So I mean
that is foreboding. That is somewhat foreboding. Yeah. Cool. And also we were talking off camera earlier about the conference you're going to. It's in Singapore. You mentioned this. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about that and why that's so interesting to you? You mentioned like the argumentative. I'm
looking at an argument mining conference in Singapore in December, and the reason why I'm interested in argument mining is there's a bunch of work being done on how you can. It goes back to this problem of how do you represent data in a way that that allows models to do a good job of representing reality. All machine learning, basically all AI, is some form of pattern recognition. When you look at the transformer architectures, the patterns it's trying to recognize is predicting the next word. There's a bunch of RLHF architecture going on outside that I don't want to talk about, but at its core, that's the pattern it's trying to recognize. When you come to things like, I don't know, unlocking your phone with your face, that's a pattern that is the bone structure of your face that the algorithm's trying to predict. That equals, Calum or Tom. And so the point I'm trying to make is underlying these models, whatever their complexity is, the thing that makes or breaks them is the quality of the data. And the data is only as good as how well it represents the reality that it's trying to model. So the job of a data scientist, a lot more than we think it is about designing good data structures and good data pipelines that really represent the reality of the problem we're trying to solve. And in that context, I'm going to a conference on argument mining, which is about how you can represent human logical discourse. And the objective of that should be building models and data structures that can sort of accurately understand what happens when humans have a dialogue like we're having, when we do things like reaching consensus, disagreeing on points, and what it means for those sorts of structures to take place under the hood. So yeah, it's all about data. It's all about representing, the world using data effectively. And in that context, human discourse, I find this idea of argument mining a potentially interesting area for research. But when it comes to CareerFoundry, we're constantly faced with the challenges of like, how do we model our students' journey through the platform? How do we model our course content in ways that allow us to do a useful job of understanding our customers, understanding our internal staff, and then making systems that help make their lives easier, stuff like that.
Excellent. And you mentioned briefly there the element of human discourse. It would be remiss of me not to ask you about kind of regulation and where you see that going. Like, it feels a little bit like the Wild West of AI right now. Like, there's not really much in the way of like nationwide regulation, or we live in the EU, but do you see that changing in the coming months, if not years?
Yeah.
And what kind of excites you about that, but also what kind of might be a limiting factor with the development of the technology?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the limiting factor is, of course, people's the old fear and greed trade-off. People's not greed, but let's say desire to build tools which make them a lot of money, make the world a better place for the people that they give it to. So that's the sort of greed aspect. And then the fear, like you say, is, I think I brought up Skynet the first time, but...
this is the second time.
There will not be a third.
We have a little counter on the screen, like Skynet mentioned twice.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. Cool. And so the fear side is, that we get it wrong. And regulation comes in many different forms. So one of the things that everyone's talking about right now in the field is that AI safety research is way behind AI development research. Like everybody's funding new model design and new downstream applications, but people are not funding how we make sure these models are safe. And AI safety or AI alignment, it's not just about you can check out the paperclip argument, which we can talk about in more detail if you want, but it's not just about solving the paperclip argument, but it's about the more nitty-gritty things of everyday AI being in our everyday lives. So, for example, making sure that our models don't discriminate against minority groups when performing things like credit checks, or performing things like profiling people using cameras on the streets. Making sure that our image generation algorithms aren't biased towards producing content that's sort of always aimed towards a Western audience, or creating things with a sort of Western bias. And a bunch of other areas where you inadvertently introduce biases. Humans create data. We then create models that sort of parrot that data back out. So if humans put bias into the data, the bias goes through the model then predicts bias back out into the world. It creates this vicious cycle of reinforcing bias rather than what we'd like to do, which is remove it. So AI safety is a big area that's underfunded and needs more funding. Interestingly, I think Anthropic and OpenAI just committed many millions of dollars towards
and
this problem.
Microsoft and also Facebook and the sort of big FANG companies, or at least 3 of them, I think. I saw this in the headline.
Okay,
I didn't
cool.
read much into it, but
No, yeah, well, me neither. I
wouldn't
guess
understand it.
At some level, there's a lot of unanswered questions there, but I'm glad that some money is being committed to it. Then, just to answer your question like more fully, a big area for us is like, what's the European regulation market going to look like? I know that they're working on AI regulation right now. The big question is, how draconian is it going to be? How much, we want to protect users' rights. We want to protect, our economy and the people in it, but we also want to allow creativity for people like me to make cool products that do good stuff. So how draconian are the new rules going to be? And then, worst case scenario, you see I think Italy was banning ChatGPT. I don't know if they're still doing that. There's also class action suits to control the use of Midjourney, because basically artists are out saying, listen, you've just scraped all of our data.
Replicating images.
Yeah. And made this amazing tool. You're charging, I think I'm paying $10 a month for Midjourney. So you're making millions of dollars, but we didn't get a penny from it. It's not the only company to do that. Clearview is another one you should check out. Basically took everyone's pictures to make sort of police profiling content, which it then sold to the US government for tens of millions of dollars.
I had not heard about this. This is quite sinister sounding.
Yeah, it's all sinister. We're not mentioning the S word again.
Okay,
but yeah.
no, not Skynet.
Yeah, exactly. You said it. Yeah.
But I mean, it is interesting, and also in the regulatory front, quite a tongue twister. Do you think the EU, because I think historically, well, in recent years with tech as well, they've been a bit more, I don't want to say progressive, but they've taken a lot more action than, say, for example, North American countries in regulating data. You have like GDPR and such.
Yeah.
Are you worried that might hold European companies back if that's overly regulated compared to competitors in like China, Russia, the US?
That's a great question. I mean, at the moment, I guess you can broadly categorize AI pioneers into 3 groups. You have the Chinese, the Americans, and the Europeans. And honestly, in terms of market cap of like new products, we're way behind. So I can't remember the exact joke, but it's something like, if you want finance AI, go to America. If you want social AI, go to China. If you want if you want AI regulation, go to Europe, because that's all we're producing right now. But I mean, we're also, I think our social welfare systems and our social structures, although they have many problems, are noble in purpose. And I like the fact that we're thinking about safety and protecting the rights of the people in our economies. It's certainly not a problem that America or China seems to be thinking overly about at the moment, as far as I'm aware from both of their respective spheres. So I'm glad that we're doing it. I'm also concerned that it's going to be an impact on our ability to grow. And there are inherent trade-offs between growing wealth and maintaining, reducing income inequality and stuff like that. These, I think, problematic to solve at the same time. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I think I'm glad that somebody in the world is thinking about it,